Sisters, the complete novel. Part 1, The Inheritance of Silence. Chapter 1, The Email That Changes Everything I Learned. My grandmother was dead through an email from a stranger at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. Not from my mother, not from anyone who actually knew me. From a lawyer in Vermont, a state I'd consciously worked hard to forget existed, using language so formal and detached that it took me 3 separate readings to understand what he was actually telling me. Margaret Ann Holloway, age 83, passed away peacefully in her sleep on October 23rd. The reading of her will would occur on November 5th. My presence was required. Required. The word sat in my chest like a stone. I was sitting in my apartment on Russian Hill in San Francisco, floor-to-ceiling windows offering an unobstructed view of the Bay Bridge that cost me $8,500 a month, which my therapist had suggested was excessive. But my therapist also thought everything about my life was excessive, so I didn't take her seriously. The apartment was designed to be perfect. Minimalist furniture from design within reach that looked expensive because it was expensive. Abstract art that I'd bought because an interior designer told me it would impress clients and make me look like I had depth. A color scheme that apparently screamed, "I have my life together," according to the woman who'd curated it. It didn't feel impressive anymore. It felt like an elaborate stage set of someone else's life. Like I was an actor who'd been cast to play the role of Julia Holloway, Senior Vice President of Product Development at Axiom Tech, and I'd finally forgotten there was a script. My name is Julia Holloway, 35 years old. One of the youngest people to reach SVP level in a company valued at $340 billion. I have a salary that hits 7 figures before bonuses. I have stock options that will make me genuinely wealthy. I have business cards made of textured paper that costs more than most people spend on a nice dinner. I have the kind of professional success that people envy at networking events. What I don't have is family. By design, by choice. By the kind of deliberate excision that requires constant maintenance, like pruning a tree to make sure it grows exactly the way you've decided it should grow. I deleted the email, then immediately undeleted it, because some part of me, the part I'd successfully murdered through years of focused effort and expensive therapy, was curious. My phone buzzed 15 minutes later. My mother. I stared at the caller ID like it was a snake that might strike through the screen if I touched it. My mother's call meant questions I didn't want to answer. It meant guilt and obligation and the slow erosion of the boundaries I'd spent 18 years constructing with the precision of a master architect. I didn't answer. 90 seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. I almost deleted it unheard, but something made me listen anyway. Maybe it was the time of day. Maybe it was the way the light was hitting the window. Maybe it was the universe preparing me for something I couldn't imagine yet. The voice that emerged from my phone's speaker was older than I remembered. It carried weight. Not just the weight of age, but the weight of having carried too much alone for too long. "Julia, it's Mom. I know you got the email from the lawyer. She's gone. She passed away last Tuesday. The funeral was Saturday. We didn't call because..." I could hear something break in her voice, a crack that suggested she'd been holding things together through sheer force of will. "We knew you wouldn't come. We knew you didn't want anything to do with us. But she left you things, Julia. The house, money, and something else. Something she wanted you to know. Please, just come for the reading, one last time, For her. The voicemail ended. I played it again immediately, like I was trying to extract some hidden meaning from the gaps between words. My grandmother was dead, and I'd learned about it from a lawyer. My mother had been there for her final days, and I hadn't. My mother had called me, and I hadn't answered. For 18 years, I'd been working toward exactly this: complete separation from a past that tried to define me. I'd built a new identity in a new city, 5 miles above sea level, where I never had to acknowledge that I came from anywhere else. I'd become someone who didn't have a family, and I'd become that someone so thoroughly that I'd almost believed it. But the thing about pasts is they don't disappear just because you stop looking at them. They wait. Patiently, persistently, like a predator understanding that eventually, no matter how well you think you've hidden, you'll have to let your guard down. I opened my calendar, stared at the schedule for the next 2 weeks. 3 board meetings, a product launch, a keynote presentation at the Web Summit, a team in flux because we were in the middle of a major pivot, a life that had meticulously eliminated any space for the kind of emotional reckoning that a grandmother's death would require. I closed the calendar, then, before I could talk myself out of it, before my rational brain could override the irrational impulse, I called my assistant. Cancel the keynote, reschedule the board meetings. I need to be gone for a week starting tomorrow. Julia? There was genuine concern in her voice. She knew me well enough to understand this was unprecedented. You've never taken time off. Is everything okay? Are you sick? No, I'm not sick, just family stuff. Do you have family? The question hung there, suspended in the space between her knowledge of me and the life she assumed I lived. I do, apparently, I said quietly. I have family. I just forgot about them. The rental car smelled like plastic and regret, and the broken dreams of 1,000 highway travelers. I drove north through California, and the further I got from San Francisco, the further I seemed to travel backward through time. By the time I crossed into Oregon, I'd turned off my work phone. By the time I reached Washington, I'd stopped checking emails. By the time I hit the border into Vermont, I felt like I was driving backward through my own history, picking up the pieces of myself I'd left behind like breadcrumbs, leading to a place I'd never intended to return to. Willow Creek hadn't changed. Population 2 sorority. According to the sign I'd seen 1,000 times before, same as it had been 18 years ago when I was 17 and desperate and dreaming of literally anywhere else. Main Street still had the same antique shops with their dusty windows, the same diner where I'd worked summers between high school and college, the same high school where I'd spent every lunch period in the library studying for the SAT, making plans that would take me so far from here that I'd never have to come back. I'd kept that promise to myself. Until now. The lawyer's office was above a pharmacy, which seemed appropriately depressing. A metaphor for how my grandmother probably thought of her legal affairs, I supposed. Something you needed when things were wrong. Something you wanted to be over quickly. I sat in my rental car for 45 minutes before I went inside. I practiced breathing exercises that my therapist had taught me. Breathing exercises I'd paid approximately $400 per session to learn, telling myself that I was in control of this situation. That I could feel my feelings and manage them simultaneously. That I was a woman who had engineered her entire adult life around not being vulnerable, and I wasn't about to start now. When I finally climbed those creaky stairs, I was as prepared as I would ever be to meet whatever was waiting for me, which turned out to be 3 women I'd never met, who were apparently my half-sisters. The oldest was already sitting in the waiting room when I arrived, and she immediately stood up, like she recognized me, which made me understand that we must look similar. Same bone structure, same height, same something in the eyes that suggested we'd all spent our lives trying to be careful about something. "You're Julia," she said. Not a question, a statement delivered with the confidence of someone who'd been researching, who'd prepared for this moment in a way I hadn't. "And you are?" Emma Grant. I'm your half-sister, through Margaret, your grandmother, who was apparently also my grandmother." She smiled nervously, like she'd practiced this sentence 100 times and was absolutely terrified she'd mess it up, now that it mattered. Which is incredibly strange to say to someone I've never met, but am somehow connected to through blood and shared family trauma. Before I could process this, a woman with pink hair and tattoos covering both forearms emerged from the bathroom holding a glass of wine in her hand. Wine, at 9 in the morning, like this was the most natural response to unexpected family meetings. "Found the emergency stash in the break room," she said, gesturing with the glass like it was a trophy she'd won. "Pretty sure alcohol shouldn't be kept next to employee bathrooms, but I'm not going to complain about a loophole when I find one." She extended her other hand. "I'm Samantha. I'm apparently the artistic problem child of our delightful group of half-sisters. Also, the one with zero filter, which my therapist says is something we should probably work on." The third woman was softer than the other two. Her edges were less defended, her posture less braced for impact. She wore no makeup. Her clothes were clean but thrifted from places I recognized from the Portland suburbs, and she had the look of someone who'd spent her life taking care of others while no one had taken care of her. Which meant she was probably the one who was actually thrilled about meeting her biological sisters, despite the inherent strangeness of the situation. "Loren," she said quietly. "I'm the youngest. Also apparently the only one thrilled about meeting my biological sisters. Is that weird? That feels weird. But I've been in the system, foster care, since I was 10, so I've kind of always been looking for family. Didn't know I had biological sisters, but I guess Grandma kept that secret pretty close." The lawyer, Mr. James Richards, Esquire, a grandfatherly type, who'd clearly seen enough family dysfunction in his career to be unshocked by anything, gestured for us to sit in his conference room. He had the kind of face that suggested he'd been handling estate matters for so long that death and inheritance had become abstract concepts. Like he was talking about the weather instead of the dissolution of human beings and the redistribution of their material possessions. "Before we proceed," he said, settling into a leather chair that had probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, "I need to explain the terms of Margaret's will. They are unconventional. In fact, I've been handling estates for 32 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this." He turned on a laptop that was older than I expected. The screen flickered to life. And then my grandmother appeared. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. But her eyes, those bright blue eyes that I'd inherited and spent my adult life learning to hide behind professional distance and expensive sunglasses, were exactly the same. Sharp, present, seeing things that other people missed. "Hello, my girls," she began, and something in my chest cracked in a way I hadn't expected and was completely unprepared for. Chapter 2, The House Remembers Everything. The house appeared through the trees like a memory materializing into physical form after being banished to the depths of the unconscious mind. Victorian, white, with a wraparound porch and gabled roof and the kind of architecture that belonged in a magazine about New England charm, or a Gothic novel about the ways families destroy themselves. 3 acres of land, mostly forest now because my grandmother had stopped maintaining the gardens years ago, though her flower beds still showed evidence of having been carefully tended once, the way some women tend to the things they love even after they stop being loved back. I'd grown up here, part-time, after my parents separated, after my mother's drinking got worse, after the nights started to feel less safe. My grandmother became my sanctuary. I'd spend summers and holidays in this house, in the room with the white iron bed and the bookshelves full of novels about girls escaping their lives. The irony of that wasn't lost on me. I pulled into the driveway at 4 p.m. 2 other cars were already there, Samantha's beat-up Subaru covered in activist stickers. Save the planet, dump heteronormativity. Consent is sexy. Abolish the prison industrial complex. And Loren's sensible Honda Civic with a car seat visible in the back, which suggested maybe I didn't know the full story of who Loren was, which meant there was a child, which meant complexity I hadn't anticipated. When I walked inside, the smell hit first. Lavender and old books. The exact smell of safety from my childhood. The exact smell I'd been trying to escape for 18 years. In the kitchen, Loren was cooking something that smelled like tomato bisque and Sunday afternoons. She looked up from her cutting board with genuine pleasure, like she was actually happy to see me. Not the kind of happy that comes from politeness, but the kind that comes from genuine hope that this might work out. I found this suspicious and slightly unnerving. "Hi," she said, uncertain. "I hope this is okay. I cook when I'm nervous. I'm very nervous about all of this. About meeting you guys. About whether we'll have anything in common, or if this is just going to be awkward for a week, and then we'll never see each other again." "It's fine," I said, meaning it on a surface level. "What are you making?" "Tomato bisque. It was in Grandma's recipe box. I thought it would be nice to use one of her recipes on our first night. It felt, I don't know, ceremonial, maybe. Respectful, like we're honoring her by using her things, even though she's not here to..." She stopped herself, realizing she was rambling. "Sorry, I do that when I'm nervous. I ramble." "Most people do," I said, which wasn't helpful, but was honest. Samantha emerged from the living room holding a glass of wine, like it was a trophy she'd won in a competition no one else knew they were entering. "Found the wine cellar. Grandma had legitimately excellent taste. We're talking high-end Burgundy and Bordeaux, not the cheap stuff. Want some? Because I'm starting to think alcohol is justified in this situation." "It's before 5, I pointed out, which was something my mother used to say, which made me immediately regret saying it. "It's after 5 somewhere, and also it's our first night as accidental sisters bonding over a dead grandmother's house, so I think alcohol is not just justified, but medically recommended," Samantha said. She wasn't wrong, which was annoying. I accepted a glass of wine that tasted like it cost more than I wanted to calculate. We drank wine and made uncomfortable small talk while Loren finished cooking. We discussed weather patterns in our respective states. Emma was from Boston, Samantha from New York, Loren from Portland. We discussed our jobs in the kind of surface-level way that people use when they're actively avoiding discussing anything actually meaningful. We avoided the obvious topic that we were strangers sharing a dead grandmother's house, bound by genetics and a woman's final wishes. Trying to figure out if blood actually meant something, or if we were just going through the motions, because we'd been instructed to do so. When Emma finally arrived at 6 p.m., looking frazzled from a delayed flight and a rental car that had broken down on the highway just outside Syracuse, we sat around the dining table, the same table where I'd done homework 30 years ago, where I'd sat with my grandmother while my mother yelled at someone on the phone in the other room, where I'd learned that some places felt safer than others, and ate soup that tasted like memory. After dinner, Emma cleared her throat with the delicate precision of someone who'd been planning what to say, and was terrified of messing it up. "So," she said, "I think we need to talk about this, about what Grandma wanted, about the letters she left for us in our rooms, about why we're actually here." "The letters that are probably going to be emotionally devastating?" Samantha asked, not unkindly. "The ones that are probably going to explain why we've spent our entire lives not knowing the other three existed?" "Probably," Emma agreed. "But don't you want to know what she had to say? Don't you want to understand? I mean, I'm a historian. I spend my entire professional life trying to understand why things happened the way they happened. This is like the most important story I've never been told." "She's a historian," Samantha said to me and Loren, like this explained something fundamental. "She can't help but see everything as narrative. Everything is a story to be analyzed and documented." "And you're an artist," Emma countered, "which means you see everything as expression of pain. At least let me try to see this as an opportunity to understand something about our family that's been hidden from us." "Hidden or protected?" Loren asked gently. "Maybe Grandma had reasons for keeping us separate." "That's exactly what we need to find out," Emma said. Loren stood. "I'm going to read my letter. I think I need to. I think it might help me understand things. About my mom. About why I ended up in the system. About whether there was something I could have done differently." "You were 10 years old," I said flatly. "Nothing that happened was your fault." "I know that intellectually," Loren said. "But knowing things intellectually and feeling them are different. So I'm going to read my letter. And I think you should all read yours too." "You go right ahead," Samantha said. "Embrace your feelings. Let the trauma flow through you. The rest of us will drink wine and pretend we're not also emotionally devastated by the revelation that we have sisters we never knew existed." We climbed the stairs together anyway, though no one said we would. The house seemed to remember us. Every creaky floorboard, every turn of the hallway felt familiar, like muscle memory in the walls themselves. My room was the third on the left. I'd lived in apartments around the world in the intervening years, had moved through cities and states and countries, but I didn't think I'd ever truly replicated this room. The white iron bed with the quilted coverlet that my grandmother had picked out when I was 7 years old. The bookshelves full of novels about escape. The desk where I'd planned my future and promised myself I'd never return. On the pillow lay an envelope with my name in my grandmother's handwriting. I stood there for a solid minute, staring at those 4 letters, Julia, written by a hand I hadn't seen in 18 years, but had dreamed about more often than I wanted to admit. I opened it anyway. "My dearest Julia, if you're reading this, you came. You actually came back. I wasn't sure you would. I wouldn't have blamed you if you didn't. But you did, and that means something. I know you're angry at me. You've earned that. I failed you in ways that are too numerous to count, too deep to repair, too fundamental to ignore. Your mother, Kathleen, was my oldest living child when you were born. She was brilliant and broken in the way people are when they've inherited pain they don't know how to process. She was beautiful and damaged and fierce in her own destruction. I tried to help her, but my help mostly amounted to showing up and witnessing her deterioration without doing anything meaningful to stop it. I stood by while she hurt you. I watched, and I did nothing because I was afraid that if I intervened, I'd make it worse. I was afraid of being wrong. I was afraid of the legal complications. I was afraid of many things. Fear turned out to be a terrible guide. But here's what I want you to know. You were never the problem. You were never the reason your mother was difficult. You were never the thing she couldn't handle. You were simply caught in the aftermath of her brokenness. And you survived. Not just survived, thrived. You became exactly the kind of person who could survive that kind of childhood. You became someone strong and capable and fierce in your independence. I'm so proud of you, Julia. Not because you escaped, but because you did it without letting it destroy you. Because you built something from nothing. Because you became someone. Now I'm asking you to do something harder. I'm asking you to open your heart to these three women. Not because it's easy. Not because you owe them anything. But because I genuinely believe they need you. And more importantly, I believe you need them. You've spent 18 years believing that you don't need anyone. That independence is the same as strength. That solitude is the same as peace. But solitude isn't peace, Julia. It's just solitude. And you deserve more than that. You deserve family. Not the family you were born into. I understand why you rejected that. But chosen family. Family you build with people who understand what it's like to be broken in specific ways. These three women are broken in ways that complement your brokenness. They are strong in ways that shore up your weakness. They are the sisters you didn't know you needed. I love you. I always have. I'm sorry it took me until now to say it clearly. I'm sorry it took my death to bring us all together. I'm sorry for many things, but I'm asking you, as a final gift from a woman who will no longer be here, to ask, please try. Please give these women a chance. Please let yourself be known. All my love, your grandma. I folded the letter back into the envelope and sat on the bed I'd slept in as a child. I let myself feel the weight of it. The letter, the house, the past, the present, the future that suddenly felt like it was shifting beneath my feet. Downstairs, I could hear the others moving around their rooms, each of them confronting their own version of abandonment, pain, and loss. Each of them trying to make sense of why a dead woman had forced them into this house, into this situation, into this strange, new family configuration that didn't quite make sense yet. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to cry. Not heaving sobs, I hadn't cried like that in years. Just quiet tears that slid down my face while I sat on my childhood bed and tried to understand what my grandmother had been trying to tell me. Then I turned off the emotional response, washed my face with the precision of someone who'd spent years learning to compartmentalize, and went downstairs to drink wine with my accidental sisters. Chapter 3. The Room That Shouldn't Exist. The house kept secrets. We discovered the first one the next morning while Loren was looking for a spare key to the wine cellar. She found a loose panel in the downstairs closet. The kind of panel that shouldn't exist, that had no reason to exist, that violated the basic architectural logic of the house's layout. Behind that panel was a door, not a closet door. A real door painted the same color as the wall, designed to be invisible. Designed to be found only if you knew where to look. Designed to be kept from view. "This doesn't make sense," Emma said, running her fingers over the frame like it was an ancient artifact she was cataloging for a museum. She'd already put her historian brain into overdrive, making notes, sketching the dimensions, attempting to create a logical explanation for impossible architecture. "There's no room here. This closet backs onto the kitchen. There shouldn't be another room behind this wall." "Unless," I said slowly, understanding something about my grandmother that I hadn't wanted to acknowledge, "there is. And she didn't want anyone to find it." The key was in Grandma's desk, taped to the underside of the drawer with yellowing tape that had been there so long it had become part of the wood itself. Of course it was taped there. My grandmother had always had a particular, almost poetic, relationship with irony and symbolism. When we opened the door, we stepped into another universe entirely. The room was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, with no windows and no natural light. But it was a perfect archive. Metal filing cabinets lined 3 walls. Plastic storage boxes were stacked with military precision. Shelves contained documentation organized so carefully that you'd think someone had spent decades preparing for this moment. Because someone had. "Oh my God," Emma whispered. She moved toward the files like she was in a trance, like she'd spent her entire academic career hoping to find something exactly like this and couldn't quite believe it was real. "It's a complete family archive." She was documenting everything. We started pulling files at random, and what we found was methodical, obsessive, meticulous documentation of 4 lives we didn't know we had. There were photographs, thousands of them. Some we'd never seen, some that looked like they'd been taken without our knowledge or consent. There were birth certificates and medical records and school transcripts and psychological evaluations dating back decades. There were photographs of our parents as young people. Our mother, before the drinking, had carved lines into her face. Our fathers, before they'd abandoned their families. Younger versions of ourselves in places we'd never remembered being. But there were also photographs of us. All 4 of us. Throughout our entire lives. In different cities, different states, at different ages. In moments we'd thought were completely private. "She was following us," Samantha said, her voice small and confused. She was holding a photograph of herself at age 16, standing outside a gallery in Brooklyn, showing what looked like her first art installation. "She was spying on us." "Not spying," Emma corrected gently. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice too. "Documenting, recording, keeping evidence." "Of what?" Loren asked. Her voice was quieter than Samantha's, but underneath the quiet was something sharper. "What was she collecting evidence of?" "I was looking at something else, a file labeled Kathleen Holloway, Psychological Evaluations. Inside were medical reports dating back to 1985, assessment of her mental health, documentation of depression, anxiety, substance abuse issues. In the margins, Grandma's handwriting. "She's in pain. She's passing the pain to Julia. I need to do something, but I don't know what. I don't know how to help her. I don't know how to help him. I don't know how to help any of them. All I can do is watch and wait and hope that someone survives this." The date was from when I was 7 years old, the year I started showing up at Grandma's house after school, too afraid to go home, too afraid to face what waited for me there. "She was trying to protect us," I said slowly, understanding something about my grandmother that shifted something inside me. "She kept records because that was the only way she could keep us safe. If something happened, she had evidence. If we were taken away, she could show that someone had been paying attention, that we mattered." "Evidence of what?" Samantha asked. "Evidence that we existed?" Evidence that we mattered, I corrected. Evidence that someone was paying attention, that we weren't invisible. We spent the rest of the day in that secret room, and it became clear that my grandmother had been conducting a multi-decade investigation into her own family's dysfunction. Like an archaeologist excavating the ruins of her own life, trying to understand the pattern of destruction and abandonment and addiction that repeated itself across generations. We learned that she'd been married 3 times, that each marriage had produced children, our mothers or uncles or aunts, that each relationship had ended in some combination of infidelity, addiction, or fundamental incompatibility. We learned that our parents, Grandma's children, had inherited her terrible taste in partners, that they'd made catastrophic choices and created us in the aftermath of their mistakes. We learned that Grandma had tried to help. She'd set up trusts. She'd paid for therapy sessions that our parents had often skipped. She'd hired lawyers to navigate custody issues. She'd even hired private investigators to follow us and take photographs, which was invasive and problematic. But also, I was beginning to understand, the only way she knew to love us from a distance. Chapter 4. The Family Tree. We set up camp in the dining room, like we were preparing for war. We had laptops, notebooks, printed photographs, and a roll of butcher paper that Emma used to create what she called a visual genealogy of dysfunction, using different colored strings attached to photographs and documents. She connected our family members like we were investigating a conspiracy. In a way, we were. We were investigating the conspiracy of secrets that had kept us apart. "Okay," Emma said, standing back to admire her work. The wall looked like something from a detective's office, chaotic but methodical. "Let me walk you through this. Margaret Ann Holloway, that's Grandma, was born in 1941. She had 3 marriages and 4 children. The math seems wrong because it is." "Wait," I interrupted. 4 children but 3 marriages? How does that work?" "This," Emma said, pointing to a photograph of a young man, "is James, born 1966. He was Margaret's biological son from a relationship she had before her first marriage. She was 19 years old. The man was married. She got pregnant. He wouldn't leave his wife. So she left him, raised James alone for 2 years, and then married Robert Sinclair." She continued creating the family tree as she talked, and the more I understood that this wasn't just a story about one family. This was the story of how trauma passes through generations like a virus, infecting everything it touches. "Robert Sinclair was Jennifer's father," Emma said, pointing to another photograph. "That's my grandmother. Robert left when Jennifer was 2. Margaret tried to get custody, but Robert's family had money and lawyers, and Margaret was a poor single mother in the 1960s. They won. Jennifer grew up angry at men and swore she'd never need anyone. But then she did," Samantha said, understanding the pattern already. "She met Randall Grant in 1989. She thought she'd found someone different, someone safe. They had me in 1992. But Randall wasn't safe. He was just better at hiding his damage than other men in her life." Emma pointed to my mother on the chart. Kathleen Holloway, Julia's mother, was born in 1973. Her biological father was James Chen. Margaret married him thinking he was different from Robert. He wasn't. He had affairs. He gambled away money. He eventually left, taking significant portions of their savings with him. "So Kathleen grew up with an absent father," I said, understanding the pattern. "And then she married someone who abandoned her." "David Holloway," Emma confirmed. No relation to Grandma's first husband, confusingly. He was charming and ambitious. They married when Kathleen was 21. Julia was born in 1990. David left when Julia was 7 years old. Not dramatically, I found myself adding, as if I needed to defend him. He just quietly went. He left a note that said, "I can't do this anymore," and never came back. He couldn't handle Kathleen's depression and drinking, Emma said, consulting Grandma's notes carefully. He was drowning, so he escaped. It wasn't about you, Julia. It was about him not being equipped to handle her pain. But I didn't know that, I said quietly. I spent my childhood thinking he left because I wasn't enough. Because no one told you otherwise, Emma said gently. Kathleen couldn't. She was too busy dealing with her own abandonment trauma. Your grandmother could have, but she was afraid of overstepping. So you carried that belief alone for 18 years. She moved to Samantha's side of the tree, and her voice became quieter, more careful. Thomas Holloway was born in 1976. He was Margaret's son from her second marriage to James Chen. He had better initial circumstances than his siblings. Michael, his adoptive father through Margaret's third marriage, was actually a decent man. But Thomas inherited his mother's propensity for pain and bad choices. He met Elijah Stone in 1991. They were in a relationship. Elijah was an addict. Thomas became an addict to cope with Elijah's addiction. And they died, Samantha said quietly, staring at the photographs. In 1998, overdose. I was 3. You were 3, Emma confirmed. Your grandmother brought you here. She raised you for a year, and then she found you an adoptive family in Brooklyn. She created a backstory that your parents died in a car accident. She protected you from the truth, and then she watched from a distance as you grew up. Emma finally pointed to Loren. You're the youngest of all of us. Loren Holloway, born 1999 from a brief relationship between Kathleen and a man who isn't even named in these files. That tells you something about his significance to her. And then Lucas Holloway, born 2001 from another brief relationship. Lucas is my full brother, Loren said quietly. I found him 3 years ago through the foster care system. We reconnected. He's been in and out of the system since we were separated. So you know about foster care, Emma said, which was probably the understatement of the century. I lived in 7 different homes before I was 12, Loren said, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. Social services got involved after Kathleen's 3rd overdose. I was 10 years old. Lucas was only 8. They took us. We were separated into different homes. It took 5 years for her to get stable enough to regain custody. But by then, she trailed off like she couldn't finish that thought. By then, you'd learned to be independent, I said, understanding something about Loren that suddenly made perfect sense. By then, I'd learned that people leave, she corrected quietly. Even when they love you, even when they're trying. Even when they have every intention of keeping you safe, they still leave. And you learn to not trust that. You learn to not believe in it. We sat with the weight of that family tree for a long time. It was a tree that didn't look like a tree at all. It looked like the documentation of a disaster, repeated across generations, each person trying and failing to do better than their parents. Chapter 5, The Transformation. Over the next 7 days, something shifted in the house. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a sudden moment where everything changed. It was subtle and persistent and ultimately transformative. The way ice melts so slowly, you don't notice until suddenly the whole landscape has changed. It started with cooking. Loren taught us how to make her signature dishes. Not just any dishes, specifically the dishes our grandmother had made for each of us. Samantha's favorite chocolate cake. Emma's preference for chicken soup. My beloved tomato bisque. Loren's own favorite, which was a rhubarb pie that tasted like spring and summer simultaneously. We cooked together in the kitchen, and Samantha made us laugh. Not fake laugh, but genuine laugh. The kind that comes from moments of unexpected levity in the midst of processing family trauma. She had this habit of narrating her own cooking failures like she was a sports commentator. And there's the butter, burning. Here comes the smoke. Will she rescue it in time? The suspense is killing me. We watched movies together, the kind of movies that let you cry without it being obvious. Samantha had opinions about every single one and wasn't shy about sharing them. Emma would pause the movie and explain the historical or psychological significance of scenes. Loren would make comments about what the characters could do differently if they had access to proper mental health resources, and I would sit there, gradually letting down my guard, gradually allowing myself to be moved by stories about people who were broken in ways I recognized. We drank wine and talked about our lives. Not surface-level conversation about weather and jobs and the things you discuss with acquaintances at networking events. Real conversation, the kind where you admit things you haven't admitted to anyone. Emma told us about her father, how he disappeared when she was 5 years old, how for years she thought it was because she wasn't enough, how she became an obsessive overachiever, always trying to prove her worth to a man who wasn't there to see it. How she'd spent 15 years studying her family history, trying to understand why he left. How she became a historian because she needed to understand stories about people abandoning their families. And if she understood those stories well enough, maybe she could understand her own. Samantha told us about her adoptive family. How they loved her, but she never quite felt like she belonged. How she threw herself into art because it was the only way she could express the grief and rage she couldn't put into words. How she'd been terrified to meet us because she thought we'd reject her like everyone else did. How she'd built her entire personality around not needing anyone because needing people meant they could hurt you. And she'd been hurt enough. Loren told us about foster care, about being shuffled between homes, about learning very early that the only person she could count on was herself. How she became a social worker because she wanted to give other kids the stability she never had. How she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to claim her, to say, "You're ours," to make her feel like she belonged somewhere. And I told them about my mother, about the bruises hidden under long sleeves, about the nights I'd hide in my room, waiting to see what version of her would come through the door, the angry version or the sad version, or the apologetic version, about my grandmother being my sanctuary, about leaving and never looking back, because looking back meant acknowledging how much I'd needed to escape. By the 7th day, we weren't just in the same house. We were becoming something. Not quite family yet. That would take time and work and intention. But friends. Real friends. The kind of friends who know your history and don't judge you for the ways you're broken. It was on day 8 when we discovered something crucial. We were all broken in complementary ways. Emma needed structure and intellectual understanding. She processed trauma through analysis and documentation, and the careful construction of narrative. Samantha needed expression and emotional honesty. She processed trauma through art and creativity, and the refusal to pretend she was okay when she wasn't. Loren needed care and connection. She processed trauma through helping others and building infrastructure for healing. I needed control and independence. I processed trauma through achievement and excellence and the relentless pursuit of success. Together, we made something functional. Loren would cook and we'd all eat. Samantha would make us laugh at our pain. Emma would help us understand the pattern, frame it in historical and psychological context. And I would provide the plan, the organization, the framework we needed to move forward. We're like the parts of a broken clock, Samantha said on day 9, sitting on the porch with coffee that Loren had made perfectly. Separately useless, together, we might actually tell time. That's kind of profound for 9 in the morning, Emma said. I have deep thoughts before coffee, Samantha agreed. Also, I'm always like this when I haven't had a cigarette. I get contemplative and philosophical. My therapist says it's a defense mechanism. Your therapist is probably right, I said. Most defense mechanisms are exactly what we use to defend ourselves against things we can't face directly. Look at you, Samantha said. Getting all psychologically sophisticated. The corporate robot can feel things. The corporate robot is learning that robots don't actually exist, I said. They're just people who've gotten very good at hiding. Chapter 6, The Final Letter. On the morning of day 11, Loren found another envelope in the secret room. It was addressed to all of us, but the instruction was clear. Only open together after day 10. We were 1 day short, but we gathered in the living room anyway, standing around the envelope like it contained something sacred. Because it did. Because it contained Grandma's final words, her final attempt to reach us, her final gift. Inside was a letter in Grandma's handwriting, dated just 2 weeks before she died. Emma read it aloud, her voice steady but not quite. My girls, by now you've looked through the files. You've learned your history. You know where you come from. You come from pain. You come from abandonment. You come from addiction and infidelity, and the kind of generational trauma that reproduces itself like a virus, mutating as it passes from one generation to the next, infecting everything it touches. But I need you to know this too. You also come from resilience. You come from people who, despite everything, kept trying. You come from a grandmother who spent her entire life trying to hold together something that wanted to fall apart. I kept you separate because I thought your pain would compound if you were together. I thought knowing about each other would make it worse. I thought I was protecting you. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. The most damaging lie a parent can tell is the lie that protects you from feeling pain. Because you need to feel pain. You need to experience it. You need to survive it. Otherwise, you never learn that you can. I kept you apart because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew about each other, you'd try to form some kind of family. That you'd try to be there for each other. That you'd get tangled up in each other's damage, and it would drag you all down. I was afraid I'd made such terrible choices that even my grandchildren couldn't survive, knowing about each other. That my brokenness had contaminated the entire family tree so thoroughly that even proximity to each other would be toxic. But your grandpa, before he died, we had conversations about what I'd done and why. Long conversations about my choices and my fears and my attempt to manage something that couldn't be managed from a distance. He told me something that changed everything. Knowing about the pain doesn't multiply it. Carrying it alone multiplies it. You're supposed to teach them that they're not alone. He was right. He was right all along. So here's my final gift to you. The house, the money, the files, all of it is yours, but the real gift is each other. I'm asking you something very hard now. I'm asking you to stay connected, to support each other through the hard parts of building actual, functional lives. To be the family I couldn't be. You're not going to fix each other. That's not your job. That's not why I'm bringing you together. You don't need fixing. You're not broken in that way. You're not cars that stopped working, waiting for someone to repair you. You're broken in the ways that make you capable of profound compassion. You're broken in the ways that make you strong. You're broken in the ways that matter. I'm asking you to show the next generation that family doesn't have to be broken. That love doesn't have to hurt. That it's possible to choose differently. I know this is a lot to put on 4 young women. I know I'm asking you to do the emotional labor that I couldn't do myself. I know I'm asking you to be stronger than me, but I believe you can do it. I believe you're exactly the kind of people who can break the cycle, who can take the worst things and transform them into something meaningful. I love you all. I always have. I'm sorry it took me until now to say it clearly. I'm sorry it took my death to bring us all together. I'm sorry for many things, but I'm asking you, as a final gift from a woman who will no longer be here to ask, please try. Please give these women a chance. Please let yourself be known. Please build the family that I wanted to build but was too afraid to build. Your grandma. We read the letter in silence. When we finished, Loren was crying openly. Samantha was looking out the window, her jaw tight. Emma was looking at her notes, trying to process through analysis and documentation. And I was sitting very still, not allowing myself to feel anything too loudly, but feeling everything very deeply. So, I finally said, we're supposed to stay in contact, be a family. That's what she's asking, Emma said carefully. We don't know each other well enough to be a family, Samantha said. But her voice lacked conviction now. It lacked the defensiveness it had carried 7 days ago. We know each other enough to try, Loren said. We're already here. We've already broken through the barrier. We've already shown up. Isn't the hard part already done? The hard part is just beginning, I said. Maintaining a relationship across states, across schedules, across different lives and different trauma responses and different ways of healing. That's going to be difficult. But possible? Emma asked. Maybe possible, I said. I don't know. I spent 18 years not knowing it was possible to have sisters. Now you're asking me to commit to something I have no framework for. That's exactly the point, Samantha said. We don't have a framework for any of this. So we get to create it. We get to decide what family means to us. And that's actually kind of beautiful when you think about it. Chapter 7. The Choice. On the morning of day 12, Samantha announced she was staying in Vermont. Not permanently, but she'd gotten a call from a gallery owner in Boston who wanted to show her work. She was going to move, at least for a year. Closer to us. Closer to this thing we were building. Emma surprised everyone by announcing she was taking a sabbatical. Not leaving her job permanently, but stepping back from teaching for the next year, while she wrote a book about our family. She wanted our permission to publish our stories. We all immediately granted it. It's not a therapy project, she clarified. It's a legitimate academic work about how secrets function in families, how generational trauma reproduces itself, and how chosen family can break cycles. But it's also personal. Is that okay? It's more than okay, I said. It's necessary. Someone needs to document this. Someone needs to show other people that this is possible. Loren said she was going back to Portland, but she was reducing her hours at work. She was going to focus on opening her community center, something she'd been dreaming about for years but couldn't afford. Now she could. It could be a gathering place, she said. For us. I know it's not here in Vermont, but it's somewhere that's ours. Somewhere we could meet monthly. Somewhere we could build something together. 3 pairs of eyes looked at me. Julia, Emma prompted, what are you going to do? I'd spent days thinking about this, thinking about what I wanted, what I was willing to risk, what it meant to choose family over isolation, connection over safety, vulnerability over the carefully constructed walls I'd spent 18 years building. I'm going to talk to my boss, I said slowly. I'm going to ask for a flexible arrangement. 1 week a month I'm here, or wherever we decide to meet. The rest of the time I'm working. I'll commute. It'll be complicated and difficult and probably exhausting, but, Loren asked, hope in her voice again. But I think Grandma was right. I think what I needed was this. I didn't know it, but I needed to know I wasn't alone in this. That there were people who understood exactly what I came from, exactly how I survived, exactly who I am. Samantha pulled me into a hug and I was too surprised to pull away, which meant I ended up hugging her back, which was strange and awkward and actually kind of perfect. Gross, I said, but I was smiling. We're being sentimental. It's allowed, Loren said. We're sisters. Sisters get to be sentimental. Chapter 8. The Week Between. By day 15, we'd made concrete plans, not vague promises that we'd stay in touch. Specific, actionable plans with dates and schedules and contingencies for what happens when life gets hard and staying connected requires effort. First, we were keeping the house. All 4 of us would contribute to maintaining it. We'd establish a trust to handle expenses. We'd take 1 week every month, rotating who was in Vermont. We'd use the time to debrief, support each other, and continue building something that didn't have a name yet, but that we all understood was important. Second, Emma was going to finish her book and get it published. We were going to do interviews about our experiences. We were going to make our family's dysfunction public, which was terrifying but necessary. We were going to show people that it was possible to survive family trauma and come out the other side not just intact, but actually stronger. Third, we were going to see therapists. Real ones. Not the self-help kind where you listen to podcasts and pretend you're healing. We were going to do actual psychological work to understand and process our trauma in ways that were sustainable and real. Fourth, we were going to be honest with each other, not fake nice, not pretending to be healthier than we were. Real, messy, sometimes difficult honesty. The kind of honesty that only works when you know the other person loves you anyway. This is going to be really hard, Emma said on our final morning together. We were sitting on the porch of Grandma's house, coffee mugs in hand, watching November turn into something colder and darker. Yeah, Samantha agreed. We're going to fight, Emma continued. We're going to disappoint each other. We're going to have moments where we wonder if this was a terrible mistake. We're going to have seasons where we're too busy or too tired or too broken to show up for each other the way we want to. Very likely, I said. But, Loren prompted. But we're also going to have each other, Emma said. And that's something, that's actually everything. That's the thing Grandma was trying to tell us all along. That we're not alone in this. That there are people who get it. Who understand, who choose to stay. That's not nothing, I corrected. That's everything. We sat with that for a while, each of us understanding what we were committing to. Not a perfect family, Not a family that would never fight or misunderstand each other or fail in various ways, but a family that chose each other, deliberately, consistently, despite everything. Part 2. The Legacy. Chapter 9. The Return. 6 months later. My office on the 42nd floor looks different now. I'd had my interior designer come back and remove the abstract art, the art that was supposed to make me look deep, but actually just made me look like I was trying too hard. I replaced it with photographs. Photographs of me with 3 women who weren't in my life 6 months ago. There's one of all 4 of us laughing in Grandma's kitchen, our faces flushed from wine and laughter. There's one of me and Rachel taken at our engagement party. There's one of Emma and Emma's new girlfriend, Claire, who's a literary agent and looks like she stepped out of a L.L. Bean catalog. There's one of Loren and her son Marcus, who's 6 years old and doesn't know why he has 3 aunts he just met but loves them anyway. And there's one of Samantha, Maya, and me at the opening of Samantha's first major show. My colleagues notice. "Who are they?" my coworker Marcus asks, pointing at the photo where all 4 of us are laughing in Grandma's kitchen. "My sisters," I say, and it still feels slightly surreal to say it out loud, like I'm lying even though I'm not. But somehow, in 6 months, they became my sisters. Actually, my sisters. Not just by blood, but by choice and commitment, and the daily work of showing up for each other. My phone buzzes. It's the group chat that never stops buzzing. It's become as constant as my heartbeat, as essential as breathing. "Loren, who's coming to the house this month? It's my turn to host." "Emma, I'm in, bringing a draft of my book for feedback. Fair warning, it's 400 pages, and I'm emotionally attached to every single word. Also, I'm bringing Claire. She's interested in potentially representing the book, and meeting you all seems important. Samantha, of course it is a 400-page monster. I'll be there. Gallery opening starts to slow down in May, so I can come for a full week. Maya's coming too. Julia, I'm in, and I'm bringing someone." The chat explodes. Loren, "Oh my God!" "What, Emma? You're bringing a girlfriend to meet us?" Samantha, "I'm officiating the wedding. Fair warning." Julia, "Nobody's getting married. Calm down. It's been 2 months. Her name is Rachel. She works in our New York office. We met at a conference." Emma, "Do you love her?" Julia, "I don't know. Maybe. I'm still learning how to feel things." Loren, "That's beautiful." Samantha, "Bring her. We'll vet her. If she's not good enough for you, we'll make sure she's appropriately terrified." I laugh at my phone, actually laugh. Something I do more of these days. Chapter 10. The Evolution. Rachel is nervous when we drive up to the house 3 weeks later. The Victorian looks different in spring. The gardens have come back to life. The trees are full. Everything is green and hopeful and full of possibility. "They're going to hate me," she says as we pull into the driveway. "They're going to think I'm using you, that I'm leading you on, that I'm going to hurt you because I don't know how not to." "Are you?" I ask. "Hurt you? I don't know. But I'm willing to try not to. That's more than I've ever been willing to do before. That's more than anyone in my family has ever been willing to do." "Then that's enough," I say. "That's more than enough." Samantha is waiting on the porch when we arrive. She takes one look at Rachel and then looks at me and nods approvingly, which apparently is Samantha's version of, "I'm willing to accept this person into our inner circle without requiring significant character assassination." Loren hugs Rachel like she's a long-lost family member. Loren hugs most people like that. It's kind of her thing. The way she loves requires full-body commitment. Emma emerges from the house with pages from her manuscript spread across the dining table like a crime scene. "Julia, you came, and this must be Rachel. I'm so glad to meet you. Julia's been very mysterious about you," which for Julia means she's actually feeling something real instead of just achieving something successfully. She stops mid-sentence and actually looks at Rachel. Really looks at her. And then she looks at me with an expression that suggests she's figured something out through pure historical analysis. "You're in love with her," Emma says. "I don't know what you're talking about," I say, which is denial, which everyone immediately recognizes as yes. "You're in love with her, and you're terrified, because love requires vulnerability. And you've spent 35 years building walls specifically to avoid that," Emma continues in her relentless historian way. "You've spent 18 years since you left home believing that you don't need anyone. That independence is strength. That solitude is peace. But it's not, is it? It's just loneliness dressed up in professional achievement." Rachel takes my hand. "It's okay to be terrified. You're worth the risk." And standing in Grandma's house, surrounded by my sisters, my actual, blood-related, recently discovered sisters, I realize that maybe I am. Chapter 11. The Reckoning. 6 months into our reunification, my mother reached out to me. We hadn't spoken since the house, since my grandma's funeral. She was in a therapy program, working through her addiction issues, trying to rebuild her relationship with Lucas, who'd stayed in the system through his teen years and was now 21 and suspicious of family in ways that made perfect sense. "I read the book," she said when we finally spoke on the phone. "Emma's book, the one that documented our family's dysfunction in excruciating detail. Emma's book, and I understood something about myself for the first time. I understood that I wasn't a bad mother because I was inherently broken. I was a bad mother because I was broken, and I didn't know how to stop the breaking. I didn't have the skills or the support or the self-awareness to do better. You were a bad mother, I said, which was mean but honest. She had been a bad mother, but she was also a woman who'd been hurt and didn't have the tools to handle it. I am, she said quietly. But I'm trying to do better now. I'm trying to understand what I did and why. I'm in therapy 4 times a week. I'm working at a dental office. I've been sober for 8 months. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know you have every right to never forgive me. But would you consider meeting with me? Not to repair everything, just to understand. I considered it. I considered the woman who'd raised me and also hurt me. The woman who'd given me the determination to escape, but also the trauma to carry with me. Yeah, I said finally. I think I could do that. We met at a coffee shop in Portland, neutral ground, a place where neither of us had history. She looked small, smaller than I remembered. She'd gotten sober, which meant she'd lost some of the bloat that alcohol had caused, but it also meant she'd revealed the actual damage underneath. I'm sorry, were the first words out of her mouth. I'm sorry for hitting you. I'm sorry for the bruises I hid. I'm sorry for the nights you spent hiding in your room. I'm sorry for choosing alcohol over you. I let that sit. The apology I'd spent 18 years not expecting and couldn't really accept in one conversation. What are you doing now? I finally asked. With your life? I'm working as a receptionist. I'm living in a studio apartment. I'm going to AA 3 times a week. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not angry and drunk. That's good, I said, meaning it on a level that surprised me. That's real work. It's not enough, she said. It's not enough to fix what I did to you, but it's what I have to offer. We didn't instantly become a functional family with my mother. That would be unrealistic and dishonest. But we became something. We became people who could sit together and acknowledge pain without it consuming us. We became people who could see that Kathleen was a victim of her circumstances while also holding her accountable for the choices she made. It was complicated and messy, and actually real, which was worth more than a neat resolution would have been. Chapter 12, 2 Years and Counting. The book came out in September. Emma had titled it The Inheritance of Silence: How Secrets Destroy Families and Love Repairs Them. The publisher had wanted something more commercial, something with numbers in it. 4 sisters reunited after 35 years, or some such nonsense. But Emma stood firm. Eventually they'd agreed. What surprised everyone was that it became a genuine bestseller. Not Oprah-level bestseller, but legitimate bestseller. The kind where it shows up on the New York Times list, and people actually want to read it. Publishers Weekly called it a profound meditation on the ways families break and heal themselves. The Atlantic wrote an article about intergenerational trauma and how our generation was breaking cycles. Suddenly, we were the public face of family dysfunction done right. It was strange and uncomfortable and occasionally wonderful. We were invited to speak at universities and hospitals and therapy conferences. We were featured in articles about chosen family and trauma recovery. We became, somewhat accidentally, advocates for people who were struggling with similar issues. Rachel and I got married on a Friday in June, 2 years after I received the email about my grandmother's death. We had the wedding in Vermont at the house. Just family, which meant my 3 sisters, their partners, my mother and Lucas, Emma's father, who'd actually showed up after decades of absence, reconciliation being another part of this story that deserved its own arc, and the core people who mattered. Emma gave a speech about chosen family. Samantha had created art installation pieces for the ceremony, abstract pieces representing the 4 of us coming together, transforming pain into beauty. Loren had catered the event with food from Grandma's recipes. And my mother watched from the audience, crying, like she was finally understanding what family could be when it worked. "You're happy?" Rachel whispered to me during the reception. "I'm learning how to be," I said. "It's still strange sometimes, but yeah, I'm getting there." Chapter 13, The 5-Year Mark. The second book came out last year. Emma had written a follow-up to The Inheritance of Silence, focusing specifically on what happened after the initial reunion. It was called Chosen: How 4 Women Built a Family from Secrets. It went straight to number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. Samantha's career as an artist had exploded. She had shows booked for the next 3 years. She'd moved to Boston, which put her perfectly positioned between us. She'd also fallen in love with a woman named Maya, an architect who designed Rachel and I's new house in San Francisco. They're planning their own wedding for next year. Emma had left academia. She'd become a full-time writer and speaker, giving talks about family systems and intergenerational trauma. She'd also fallen in love with a kind librarian named David, who'd read both her books and decided he wanted to know the author. They got engaged last month. Loren's community center had expanded to 2 locations. She was opening a 3rd in Vermont, literally across the street from Grandma's house, which we'd decided to make into a retreat space for people working through family trauma. Her son Marcus had started kindergarten, and she'd recently started dating someone seriously, a man named James who works in education. and I'd left Axiom Tech about a year ago. I started my own company focused on using technology to connect fragmented families. It sounds corny when I say it out loud, but it's worked. We've helped 17,000 families reconnect in the first year. The house holds us still. We gather here 1 week every month. Sometimes it's all 4 of us. Sometimes it's 3. Sometimes it's us plus partners, plus Kathleen, plus Lucas, plus the extended web of people who've become family through choice. We've also created what Emma calls the Archive Project, a website where people can share their family stories, connected by themes of separation, reunion, healing, and reconciliation. We've received over 10,000 stories. We've published 100 of them. I can't believe it's only been 5 years, Loren said last month, sitting on the porch where my grandmother had watched the world change. It feels like forever, Emma said. It feels like we've always been together. We kind of have, Samantha added. Just not in the way we could consciously remember. I was listening to them, watching the Vermont landscape shift from spring to early summer. And I thought about the email that changed everything, the lawyer's notification that my grandmother was dead, the 2-week sentence that became the foundation of everything that mattered. You know what Grandma would say? I asked. What? Loren asked. That she was right all along, that we needed each other, that the worst things and the best things are sometimes the same, that everything she tried to protect us from by keeping us separate actually saved us by bringing us together. That's very philosophical for morning, Samantha said. I'm philosophical in the morning now, I replied. I'm a changed woman. I have sisters and a wife and a business that actually helps people and feelings that I experience instead of just documenting. I'm allowed to be philosophical. That night, we sat around Grandma's dining table, the same table where I'd done homework, where I'd tried to hide from my own history, where I'd eventually learned to sit with 3 women I'd never expected to know but now couldn't imagine living without. We cooked using Grandma's recipes. We opened wine from her cellar. We talked about our lives and our work and our complicated, ongoing healing. Do you think she's proud? Loren asked. Do you think Grandma's proud of what we built? I think, I said carefully, that she would say it doesn't matter what she thinks. What matters is that we're proud of ourselves, that we survived, that we thrived, that we turned her mistakes into something meaningful. We should probably make a toast to that, Samantha suggested. We raised our glasses, Emma, Samantha, Loren, and me. 4 women who'd been strangers 5 years ago. 4 women who were sisters. 4 women who'd inherited our grandmother's brokenness and learned to transform it into strength. To Grandma, Loren said. To Secrets Ending, Emma added. To Chosen Family, Samantha said. To New Stories, I finished. We drank to that. Outside, Vermont was beautiful. The sun was setting over the mountains. Somewhere in the house, the ghosts of my grandmother and her complicated, destructive, ultimately loving life were settling into peace. And inside, we were finally home. Epilogue, The Inheritance Reimagined, 10 years later. The house has changed, but not in the ways that matter. The gabled roof has been repaired. The gardens have been restored. The secret room has been digitized. All of Grandma's files have been scanned and organized into the Archive Project, accessible to people around the world who are searching for their own family histories. But the dining table is still the same. The white iron bed in my childhood room is still the same. The porch where we sit and talk is still the same. What's changed is us. Samantha and Maya have 2 children and have relocated their art practice to Vermont. Emma published 4 more books and started a nonprofit focused on family healing. Loren's community center has expanded to serve 5 states. I sold my company for enough money to never work again, but decided to keep working anyway, because meaningful work is different from work you do for money. We're all married. We all have children, or are planning to. We've all done serious therapy and integration work. We've all learned to heal not just individually, but together. My mother is sober for 10 years. She's remarried to a kind man who loves her. She's a grandmother to Samantha's kids and Loren's son. She's worked her way into forgiveness. Not forgiveness from us, but from herself. Emma's father showed up 5 years ago and has spent the last 5 years making amends for the abandonment of the past. He's not perfect, but he's present. We've had fights, real ones. Samantha and I didn't speak for 3 months in year 3 because I suggested she was using her art as avoidance rather than processing. Emma and Loren had a conflict about how much to publicly share about our family's trauma. Rachel and I almost divorced in year 6 because she felt like I was prioritizing my sisters over her, and she wasn't wrong. But we kept showing up. We kept doing the work. We kept choosing each other even when it was hard. Last month, we got a letter from a woman named Catherine. She'd read Emma's books. She'd found the archive project. She'd decided to reach out to her estranged sisters for the first time in 20 years. She wrote, "Your story gave me permission to believe that my family could also come back together. That I didn't have to live with the separation forever. That reunion was possible." We get letters like that now, not every day, but regularly. From people who are estranged, people who are broken, people who are wondering if it's possible to rebuild. We always tell them the same thing. Yes, it's possible. It's hard. It takes intention and commitment and willingness to feel pain. But it's possible, because if 4 women who met as complete strangers can become sisters in 2 weeks, if a family torn apart by secrets can come back together through honesty, if we can take what was broken and make something whole, then anything is possible. The house is full again, not just at monthly gatherings, but constantly. It's become a gathering place for people doing healing work, for people writing about their families, for people learning to love each other despite and because of all the damage. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the porch and I think about that October morning when I got the email, when I learned that my grandmother was dead and that I had sisters I never knew existed. When everything shifted, I think about the woman I was before, isolated, successful, deeply lonely. And I think about the woman I am now, still independent, but not alone, still ambitious but not consumed by achievement, still strong but willing to be vulnerable. I think about my grandmother and the legacy she left us. Not money, not a house, but the understanding that we're not alone in our brokenness, that there are people who get it, who understand, who will show up. That family isn't just what you're born into. It's what you choose, and we chose each other.